And I was so happy, about that song. Like when everyone coordinated those lyrics, and I realised that we had an opening number that ended with jazz hands and "Don't be a misogynist."
That was Siobhan, one of the people behind the Sex Workers Opera, a crowd-funded performance piece put together by workers and allies to help tell their stories. Oh yes, I'm James Purser, and this is Purser Explores the World. Well, it has been a long time between episodes, hasn't it? Let's see, it's been over a year since episode 10, where I sat down with the bloggers and political thinkers over at Ozvotes, now ozopinion.com. Since then, a lot has happened, and unfortunately this show has had to take a bit of a back seat to everything else. A little while back, I decided that I needed to get back into it. Shows like For Science and WTF Australia are good, and I do enjoy doing them, but there's something about doing a Purser Explores the World episode that I really enjoy. And I hope, dear listener, that you enjoy it as well. So here we are again. This is actually episode 20. And for this episode, being a return and also episode 20, I thought I would look at something a little different. In the past, I've covered topics as diverse as national sports, support for medical maggots, and people who just need to do it for themselves. So with that in the back of my mind, when I stumbled across the Sex Workers Opera, I thought it would be a perfect story to return. The Sex Workers Opera at its roots is an attempt to let the sex workers themselves tell their own stories, both positive and negative. And while it was performed and produced in London, it attracted stories and participants from all over the globe, from Latin America to Eastern Europe and beyond. Alex and Siobhan were kind enough to set aside their breakfast time, you may hear cutlery clinking during the discussion, to chat and explain what it was all about. Now, before we get into the discussion proper, there is just a minor language warning. If you find discussion of fetish material uncomfortable, then there's a little bit of that in there, so you may want to go and find an older episode. So let's join the discussion with Alex, telling us about how important it was to get the format right to include the diversity of stories they had.
Absolutely, it was very important for us. And so what we ended up doing was, rather than having a linear story, the show, like, a kind of beginning, middle and end of one or two characters, we kind of had a series of scenes that interwove, which would change genre, musical genre, change theatre style, and sometimes go into multimedia, so having projectors and cameras. And we even had a whole scene that was based on cam girls or cam models from the US and from Brazil.
Yeah, so going back, before we get into the details of the show, what gave you the idea of doing an opera, a performance piece?
What or who? Yeah.
We were... I was running some workshops last year, and I met someone called Clouds Haberberg, who's an ally who, so an ally means a non-sex worker who's a friend of sex workers, who had run a feminist opera company for a while, and they produced their own shows, and it was all female run, and they'd been kind of becoming closer and closer to some sex working friends, and decided they thought that an opera would be a good medium for giving platform and voice, especially to women as well.
Yeah, and so they pitched the idea to us, but in a sort of way, they told us about the idea because they knew that we were kind of setting up our experimental theatre collective, and we were kind of looking to expand and get new people involved and work on projects that were closely related to activism and things that we cared about. And so we met Clouds, who told us the idea, but they just didn't have the time or energy to really invest in actually making the idea a reality, because all the contacts, I suppose, and they just didn't have time. They work a very hectic job, and so they didn't have the time to put into it. And we sort of took the idea and went, that sounds amazing, we want to make it happen, and so we did.
All right, so you've got this idea, you've got this brilliant idea. Let's use opera as a way to tell the stories of sex workers. How did you do how hard was it to get people to come forward and tell their stories?
It wasn't easy. The thing is, with all of these things, when you get silenced groups, and sex workers have been silenced for a very long time with just people speaking for them in the media, and it is, like we were saying to you before, like it's an area where obviously, because they have been so messed around in the past by media outlets coming to find them and then kind of abusing them basically by twisting their words and moralizing. Sensationing. It kind of means that they've been very silenced, but then it's a weird thing. Like once the ball starts rolling, then everyone's like, I want to speak, I want to tell my story, I want to tell my story, which is something we kind of incorporated into the actual piece. But like,
so people are quite distrustful at first for very, very good reasons.
For totally good reasons. Like it's like, you know, if you're just suddenly coming out of nowhere saying, oh, we want to do a sex workers opera. Oh, it's we're helped by the Royal Opera House. Blah 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 blah. Like,
we both have background in activism in the UK, but not necessarily in sex work related fields. So you have to earn the trust of the community. By becoming aware of all the groups that are already out there, that we weren't already aware of, attending meetings, just getting our faces out there and getting to know people, really. Yeah. To build trust and a personal relationship.
Yeah.
So that was in the UK, but you've got stories from, as you said, Brazil, Eastern Europe. How did you manage to get across all that?
We had, when we had kind of already put feelers out there and met a few groups, and we decided we're definitely going to go ahead with it. We set an initial meeting, which is in February or so. So all of January we spent compiling lists of international organisations, networks, community groups, festivals, arts festivals, sex worker film festivals in the US, for example.
Contacting individuals as well.
We sent an email out when we finally launched the project to over about 400 global organisations and local organisations. With a call out for stories, saying we want your stories. We don't care, we don't mind, whether they're positive, negative, complex, whether they're sad, whether they're fun, whether they're interesting, whether they're boring, whether they're mundane. We want the everyday, the human, the personal, so that we can feature them in some way in the opera. Yeah. And we specified that they would be anonymous and they'd be anonymised and no one would be referenced. So there's an opportunity for people to have their voice, in some way implemented, and that happened in three ways. Or we directly made more than one scene out of a direct story, and also had one scene that featured many of the cast speaking a variety of the stories that were sent in from worldwide to the audience directly, and into individual audience members by going into the audience.
We also put all of the stories on the audience members' seats at the beginning, so that when they sat down, everyone had a different story on their chair, sent in from all over the world that they could read. And some people were passing them around the audience and having a look at them. And it's just about getting those voices heard.
And a third medium is partly through the crowdfund, as a reward, was a booklet made available of those stories and a few more stories that we'll be collecting over the next few months. But also we thought, as a part of kind of as a legacy and as an educational resource, if we were able to raise the funds to print those booklets, or at least distribute them online for free, then we could leave them in, community centres, sexual health clinics, all kinds of places for people to then engage with the stories, see people, human people, talking about their experience of sex work and maybe learn to humanise them themselves, as an educational tool.
So you did go the crowdfunding. I'm looking at your Kickstarter at the moment. Your initial target was £1,500, but you got over £2,000, which is pretty decent.
Yeah.
So what was the sort of, obviously you met your target, but what was the reaction to you putting up the crowdfund? Did you get any kickback? Because
it was very, very. We were worried that people would see us as profiteering off struggle, if they didn't see clearly where the money was going and what the principles of the project were. Because we'd already worked with a strong group by the point we launched the crowdfund, normally you crowdfund a project and then run the project.
Yep.
We'd already been running the project for a while before we crowdfunded it. And we'd already kind of built a community group and gained the trust of some people. So by the time we launched a crowdfund, that was no longer so much of a pressing issue. We had the trust of people. People were already up for spreading it around. And we also realised the good thing about crowdfunding is it's very opt-in. It's not like stealing funding from an organisation that works with charities and then it going to an artistic project rather than a grassroots, frontline on the ground project. It's more whoever wants to do this can donate if they value it. If you're not interested in that happening, you don't have to do it. That's not a problem. And one of the most amazing things about it is not only does the crowdfund make everyone who donates feel like it's partly their project, and so a sense of communal ownership, which is really powerful, and global ownership, but also it does a lot of the promotion for you for the actual workshops and the performance. Once that link is being spread around, and once you've got a campaign video and a press release associated to it, and the kind of questions and answers on the site, as you can see, you can probably see we've got our flyers up there as well. It kind of it hits so many birds with one stone. It really raises awareness of the project and promotes it in a really effective way. So it was quite special, actually, crowdfunding.
Yeah.
Very intense job.
Very intense. Yeah, it's very intense.
So you've gone through the process, you've got your project running, you've got the money now with the crowdfunding. Now comes the night. How did it go?
Well, before the night, you forget the key element, actually, is that it's not about the nights solely.
Well, yeah,
it's about the workshops. The workshops are actually almost, I would say, kind of more important in a way.
I think they were all important, but it's basically what was so special about the workshops was that obviously we had gathered support, very much online support, and very much global global network of people who were retweeting us and spreading the word. But the fact of the matter is that when we met everyone on Monday, that was 3 days before the performance, we did Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of workshops, and our first performance was Wednesday night. Our second performance was on Thursday. On Monday morning, when everyone walked through the door, the only we knew one person out of the whole group who we'd met before.
And no one within the group knew each other.
And no one within the group knew each other. And so the cast and crew were all meeting each other for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there are so many ways that it could have gone. It could have gone ridiculous in so many different ways. Luckily, with the work that we put on in designing the workshops and structuring it went incredibly. But I think that's something that was so special in the sense that if it had been different people, it would have been a completely different show.
And also in that period of 3 days, we didn't just rehearse a show that was already written. We created the show together.
Yeah.
People wrote lyrics to the songs. People decided, fleshed out whole new scenes, adapted scenes that we'd already visioned based on previous workshops. Essentially, it was communally created.
Yeah. We had a loose structure, which were based on when we'd had the 8 hours of workshops before. Or was it 8 hours or 12 hours?
Yeah.
12 hours of workshops before. And we had a loose structure of themes and ideas that we wanted to include, and we had all the stories that had been sent in. And Alex had written some music, and we had ideas. We had little ideas as to how the scenes would pan out.
Seeds.
The little seeds of scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially everyone just came in and they just added their own mark, and it was exactly what we hoped for. And our biggest fear was that we would end up with no one coming to the workshops, or a couple of people coming to the workshops and being like, oh, but I don't want to perform, or I don't know. But no, it wasn't. It was exactly what I was saying.
We had an incredible group that came together, a really special bunch who
it was exactly,
worked so hard.
It was exactly what I was saying earlier, in that once you gather that momentum, then suddenly everyone wants to be there saying, I've got a story to tell, and that's what the workshops were like. So we had nothing to worry about in that sense.
Very lucky.
Yeah, it was amazing. And the first night,
40 minutes before we went on stage.
40 minutes before we went on stage.
We finished our first quote-unquote run-through.
Which wasn't really a run-through. It was the first time we'd ever,
ever done everything back to back.
And everyone was terrified. Everyone had forgotten the words.
I mean, one of our leads had never performed on a stage before, with stage lights. And I don't know if you've been on stage before with stage lights, but stage lights really blind you. And if you've been rehearsing something in a rehearsal room for a few days, and then suddenly you've got stage lights, it transforms everything.
I'll let you in a little secret. I have been a dame in a pantomime before.
Ooh, amazing.
I know that's nothing compared to what you guys have done, but I've got a little bit of theatrical experience.
You know the jitters and the scare and the fear of,
especially
oh my God.
Especially when you're standing up there in a dress that has been out of the Duna cover because they can't find one.
Amazing.
Incredible.
That's so great. Yeah, so we were about to go on stage.
And our production manager, who had come along pretty much the day before, well, she'd been part of the workshops, but the day before said, I'm going to be the production manager so you guys can direct, which was amazing because we'd been kind of like trying to do everything at once and falling apart.
Unrealistically, yeah.
And so our production manager came up to us and said, right, guys, it's great. We've packed out the entire theatre. There's people queuing to get in. They're putting they're trying to make as much room as possible for everyone to see the show. And we were just terrified, all sitting behind the wings, going, "What if there isn't a show?"
None of us had seen the show all the way through.
No.
And people who were in different scenes hadn't seen each other's scenes,
Yeah.
And we ran it, and it was essentially almost flawless the first night. It was incredible. The energy was there. A lot of the scenes were kind of part improvised, and the audience was so receptive. So receptive. Laughing, crying,
singing along
and shouting back at people when they were asking questions to the audience.
Audience participation. We got some really audience participation. Great.
But the audience really gave a lot of energy to the performers, and we all just trusted each other. We hadn't really even done scene transitions properly, with the props and things.
Yeah.
And we had a great stage manager who just kind of went along with it and just tried his best. And
he was fantastic.
He was incredible. And everyone, it was a bit makeshift. I'm sure, a theatre expert who was in the audience might have been a bit, cringing at some of the scene changes, perhaps, or the slickness of the lights may have not been perfect. But in essence, like, the whole family kept it really together and gave it their best, and it was very human.
Well, actually, we had someone who I talked to after that first night who said to me, "Oh, I went to see a theatre show at the National Theatre last night, and this was so much better." Yeah. And I was like, "Yes."
So you had a run over 2 nights, and by the sounds of it, you had a ball. We
really did. We by the end of the first night, we'd had a lot of kind of. Also sex working activists who'd come, who we were afraid of their opinion much more than the general public, because
of course, because these people have been working for years tirelessly and thanklessly at sex work activism, and only getting, like we were saying before, awful representation in the media, and exactly like.
And we could easily be just another fun, silly, trivial representation. And luckily, the reviews we got as a result were completely the opposite. They were really validated, saying how validated they felt. Because we had fun and we had humour and comedy in some of the scenes, and some of the songs were written a bit more kind of tongue in cheek. But we also gave real space for like difficulties and pains and frustrations to come through. And frustrations with misrepresentation, and that was kind of one of the key themes. Even someone who may have previously doubted us wrote a really stunning review, which meant the world to us, really. We had Classic FM writing an article about us the next day. We know The Guardian, The Economist are in the audience. Maybe they're not names that mean anything to you, being in Australia. But
we have The Guardian here. Don't worry. They've actually decided to become a player in the local media scene. So.
Oh, what does that mean?
Wow.
Well, it means that they don't have a print paper, but they actually have an Australian website.
Okay, right. Oh, local. You mean local to Australia?
Yeah.
Interesting. They're franchising. We just sent you one of the reviews. You might have read it before. It's by Pandora Blake, who's a feminist porn producer.
Yep.
She runs her own porn, spanking porn specifically. She wrote quite a powerful review that we're very proud of. Meant a lot to us. The only real thing, not criticism really, we got is like, where the hell are more shows? What are you doing?
Well, that was going to be my next question, actually. What now?
That's our next question
too. Yeah.
To be honest, we worked so tiredly. We worked so tiredly for 7 months flat out, and it was for most of the way just the two of us,
Yeah.
in all honesty, which was a choice we made, and it could have easily gone tits up. We could have, run an awful show, awful workshops, nothing could have happened out of it. We're very lucky that it had the reception it did, and the community effect it did, because the community group that came together and made the show, we've all in touch since. Everyone's really elated. A lot of people were very, deflated after the show ended, because,
including us,
because they wanted so much more. They feel so energized, and they feel like there's so much more can come of it and stuff.
Yeah.
But a lot of people who were involved in the production were people who hadn't been involved in any sex work activism before. Some who didn't even have any community around them, sex working community around them, had no community support, and they found support in each other during the workshops. And so that's why I say it was as much about group transformation and personal transformation and process oriented as it was about product, about the show. So we're in a moment now where everyone's going, where's the next step? We're organising meetings with the group.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of have ideas
Mm-hmm.
in the pipeline. Obviously of another run, whether in that theatre or another theatre, maybe a bigger theatre if they approach us or we approach them. A tour is a possibility. For the actual show in general, we've already had interest in the US, in New York, California, and also a small in North Carolina as well, with some universities. We've had interest. What we need to decide and kind of think about, take some time to think about, really, is what model it will take if it is taken somewhere else. Because for us it's about community arts as well as it is about a smashing show that transforms people's opinions. Do we rerun similar workshops with a community group of at least 50% sex workers in another locality? Do we
run that?
Do we run those workshops?
Do we give that
empower someone else to run those workshops?
Process to other people to run them? Or...
Do we give the show as is, or with small adaptations to another group of sex workers to perform as it is? Which would be, great if it's a really powerful production that does well. It may not be as empowering as the workshops where someone writes their own opera and feel their own voice represented, which is a really important part of the process,
Mm-hmm.
and what makes it so powerful and genuine. Do we even treat it as a script to give on to other actors and other theatre companies if they're so interested? On the one hand, losing that integrity of the kind of sex worker base and the empowerment element of the production, but also gaining voice and spreading the work and having it heard more far and wide, which may be good for the actual principles, that the political intention of the project, which is to kind of destigmatize and humanize sex work. So it's kind of, we're in a crossroads, I guess. And with advice from our wonderful production managers and things, I think we're going to take a bit of time to think about that. That doesn't mean the end of it. It means we've got a cabaret show coming up on the 27th of June, in which we're going to perform a couple of excerpts to keep people interested and to show off what's going on.
And to get together and sing the songs and
have fun
again,
together, yeah.
Yeah, so just reading the review that you posted, which I will be posting on the show notes for this episode. Right. Let's see, one of the particular highlights that Pandora Blake mentions is one of the songs. I laughed at the bit in the opening scene where the cast sing "We Get Paid to Fist," and suddenly the chorus breaks apart. Fist? It's not fist, it's kiss. No, it's piss. And then shrug it off, united again as they chorus, "Don't be a misogynist." So, okay, honestly, it sounds like you guys had a really, really good time getting this all sorted out.
That song was written by everyone together.
Yeah, it was so much
in
fun.
the workshops, and yeah.
And I was so happy, about that song. Like when everyone coordinated those lyrics, and I realised that we had an opening number that ended with jazz hands and "Don't be a misogynist." That was my favourite thing in the world. I was like, I couldn't have asked for more.
and
yep.
It was important to start off because, of course, there's always going to be different factions and movements of feminism which, feel that take issue and who are fighting so hard for, well, it's not really for me to say really, but for women's rights, and the moment kind of commodification and sexuality comes in, they make assumptions about sex workers' experiences. And so rather than kind of silencing them back, we began the show by having someone interrupt the performance and
talk about the objectification of women, and talk about, you know, how by buying a ticket to the show you were supporting sex trafficking and all this kind of thing.
All these kind of
stereotypes and assumptions that are thrown. Like, how could these women obviously haven't chosen to do these things? And again, that's the assumption that all sex workers are women, which is not true. But yeah, so we had all these opinions being given, and then we basically just answered them.
Yeah.
And it wasn't us, you know. It wasn't us silencing their opinions, even though we would never take those opinions on as our actual...
No, it was just you presenting yours.
Sorry, go on.
No, sorry, it was you presenting yours.
Yeah,
exactly,
and when you have an audience there some of whom are bound to be thinking those things already, if you name them right at the beginning, rather than leaving them brewing in people's heads all the way through, so they might leave and go, oh, that's all very well and good, but what about traffic people? You know, if you answer them right at the beginning, then they can't help but have to listen to you for the rest of the show, you know, which is really important for us. So,
well, I do hope you manage to bring the show to Australia. I'd love to see it.
You could be our production manager.
I'm not that insane. I've done theatre before. I'm not doing it again. I ended up in a dress this time.
Genuinely, James, if you know anyone in theatre who might be interested in that kind of thing, obviously it might not be a very short-term thing, but it's definitely, you know, we're already looking at taking it to the US as we speak. So, you know, definitely put them in touch with us, and we can look at models.
I shall spread the word around. Once again, thank you to Siobhan and Alex. There was a bit of time zone confusion, code savings, but we managed to get there in the end. If you would like to know more about the Sex Workers Opera, or indeed would like to talk to them about possibly setting up something similar in your area, then please visit their site at www.sexworkersopera.com. They would love to hear from you. And as I mentioned in the discussion, I will be posting that link to the review. Again, the caution is there. It does contain discussion of fetishes and other subjects that may make you uncomfortable. Alright, that brings us to the close of another episode of Purser Explores the World. Now all that's left to do is to tell you how you can contact me or support Angry Beanie projects. Okay, first off, me. I'm on Twitter at PurserJ, P-U-R-S-E-R-J. You can get me via email at james@angrybeanie.com. That's B-E-A-N-I-E. Or you can post to the Angry Beanie Facebook page or Google Plus page. Yes, we are on Google Plus. If you want to support Angry Beanie, you can either subscribe to the Angry Beanie Patreon at patreon.com/angrybeanie, or you can buy some Angry Beanie merch over at redbubble.com/people/angrybeanie. All the money raised through these support efforts goes directly into Angry Beanie projects such as Purser Explores the World, and yeah, it'll basically be used to help bring you more content and hopefully get more people involved. Alright, enough self-promotion. See you all next time.